The government dips into valuable fuel reserves to counter perceived shortages and panic buying.
The ongoing situation in the Middle East does provide ongoing risks to the supply of fuel.
Rescue efforts underway after a US military refueler with 6 people on board crashes in western Iraq. 2 teenagers killed in a collision between an e-bike and a motorcycle in Brisbane. And the Battle of the Robots. School students descend on Western Sydney for the Regional Robotic Championships. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Joe O'Brien. The government is releasing 762 million litres of petrol and diesel from Australia's domestic reserves in an effort to address supply issues stemming from the war in the Middle East. It represents around 20% of the minimum stock holding obligation for petrol and diesel. Speaking to the media this morning, the Energy Minister Chris Bowen took steps to assure the public.
Fuel continues to arrive in Australia as predicted and on schedule. The government and the industry, though, are of course very alive to the fact that the ongoing situation in the Middle East does provide ongoing risks to the supply of fuel around the world.
It comes as Iran's supreme leader used Iranian state TV to send the message the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. It's Mojtaba Khamenei's first official comment on the war since his accession.
Certainly, the leverage of blocking the Strait of Hormuz must continue to be used, and opening other fronts where the enemy is highly vulnerable, if the war continues, will be considered, while observing strategic interests.
The Islamic Resistance in Iraq, an umbrella group of Iran-backed armed factions, has claimed responsibility for downing a US military refuelling aircraft in the country's west, saying it shot down the aircraft in defence of, quote, our country's sovereignty and airspace. Earlier, the US released a statement saying the incident occurred in friendly airspace. One KC-30 carrying 6 people crashed and the other landed safely. The US insists neither hostile fire nor friendly fire was involved in the incident. So, Australia will open its fuel reserves for the first time since 2022 as the war in the Middle East puts pressure on global oil supply. The government will release 762 million litres of petrol and diesel from its domestic reserves to bolster supply. Political reporter Isabella Tolles joins us now from Parliament House in Canberra. Bella, g'day. So what's the government saying about the adequacy of supply?
Good evening, Joe. Well, the government is still insisting that Australia has plenty of supply of fuel and that the issue is lying with the demand side of things. Energy Minister Chris Bowen says that Australia has plenty of fuel in its reserves and that shipments of fuel from overseas are still arriving as expected on time. The shortages, they say, come from people who are panic buying. Now, it's understandable that during this global uncertainty, people want to make sure they're not caught out without fuel. But Energy Minister Chris Bowen says people who are filling up jerry cans full of fuel to have in storage or even selling it on platforms like Facebook Marketplace are contributing to this increased demand. He says it's doubled and therefore there are shortages, particularly in regional areas. Now, the issue with this is that it could go on to affect things like Australia's food chain, having wider implications for the country.
So the government already made an announcement yesterday about making extra fuel available. What are the announcements today?
Yeah, so yesterday's announcement was about lowering the quality standards for fuel. So we changed our standards in December of last year. And so since then, we have been exporting that fuel to other countries who still have those lower standards, countries like Japan and Singapore. But yesterday, Chris Bowen announced that they were relaxing the standards here in Australia again for 60 days to allow more fuel to flow into the market. today he backed that up with another announcement. Australia has these onshore reserves of fuel that can essentially be used in case of emergency only. This is what the government talks about when they say we have 36 days left of petrol and 32 days of diesel. These are stockpiling requirements that were brought in in 2023, and it means all fuel companies have to have minimum fuel reserves, but they can't sell it unless the government give them the all clear to. And so that's essentially what has happened today, but there are some parameters. They can only sell about 20% or around 6 days worth of fuel, and it has to flow first to regional Australia where those shortages are being felt the most. So essentially it's about getting more fuel in circulation and to help with that high demand. Chris Bowen, the Energy Minister, though, says with these announcements, he doesn't want people to panic further. Here's what he had to say.
The sort of, inflammatory running out language, we are nowhere near that. We have minimum stock obligations in place. I've announced a sensible calibration today of those. 80% of it remains for future needs if necessary. That's what the MSO is designed for. That's what we're operating.
Now, as to whether or not this will actually help reduce prices at the Bowser, that's an entirely different question altogether. Experts warn that the disruption to the global market is still so large that prices could continue to rise, especially with a fifth of the world's oil being shipped through the Strait of Hormuz and those shipments being disrupted. But Australia also isn't the only country to unleash its reserves, and so there's concerns that the releasing of these emergency stocks is going to send a message to the energy market that all of these nations clearly don't believe that the war in the Middle East is going to wrap up in a week or so, as Donald Trump has suggested in the past few days.
OK, Bella Tolhurst there in Canberra. To other news now, 2 teenagers riding an e-bike have died in a collision with a motorcycle south of Brisbane overnight. Their deaths follow the release of a report last week recommending strict new restrictions on the use of e-bikes in Queensland. Will Murray reports.
Police say just after 9 p.m, a Harley-Davidson motorcycle travelling along Middle Road here in Greenbank moved to overtake a vehicle when it crashed into an e-bike coming in the opposite direction. Now, the 2 passengers on that e-bike, a 16-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl, both died at the scene. The rider of the Harley-Davidson was taken to the Princess Alexandra Hospital here in Brisbane, where he remains in a serious but stable condition. Now, the investigations into this incident are obviously in their early stages. However, early indications are that the e-bike did not have headlights on at the time of the crash. Now, this incident comes just a week after the release of a Queensland parliamentary inquiry into both e-scooters and e-bikes. Now, it made a number of significant safety recommendations following a number of deaths and thousands of injuries here in Queensland last year. Now, they included that only those aged 16 and over who carry at least a C-class learner's permit be able to ride e-mobility devices, and also that all devices that can achieve a speed of 25 kilometres per hour and over be reclassified as motorcycles. Now, the government says it is currently considering all those recommendations.
Will Murray reporting there from Brisbane. Police searching for teenagers who fled the scene of a car crash in Melbourne's west. One 15-year-old boy was killed when the car he was in crashed while travelling at 180 kilometres an hour. Reporter James Oaten has more from the scene.
Well, as you can see, the crash scene here on Derrimut Road has now been cleared, but the investigation still continues as police try and piece together the events from last night. Now, what officers have been able to confirm so far is that there were 2 cars initially involved. One of those cars was full of teenagers, maybe 6, 7, maybe even more. And they'd been acting aggressively towards the drivers of another car, and they've been speeding down here, reaching speeds of 180 kilometres an hour. And during that pursuit, they've tried to clip the car in front of them. That's been unsuccessful, and the car full of teenagers has flipped and spun out and crashed here. Now, one of the occupants, a 15-year-old boy, in the back seat of the car, he was ejected from the car, and he died at the scene last night. Police have now confirmed there were 2 other teenage boys and 2 teenage girls who have been injured, and they're assisting police with their inquiries. But police are also keen to speak to other occupants of that car. There's reports here of 2, 3 other teenagers running, fleeing from the scene. So that is a priority for police to try and find out who those people are as these investigations continue. Now, we've been speaking with some neighbours who live up here on Derrimut Road, and they say there have been issues of cars speeding up and down here, but nothing to this scale of what we saw last night. Let's have a listen to one of those residents.
I heard a car race past at between 120 or 160 k's an hour, large bang, and I came out to the scene last night to find a young individual lying on the bitumen and 3 mangled cars.
Now, when that car full of teenagers did crash, it actually clipped 2 other cars that were driving along this road, and the drivers of those cars fortunately did not sustain serious injuries. But when you look at the magnitude of the crash here and the debris everywhere and the speeds that these cars were travelling, 180 kilometres an hour, police say it's absolutely sheer luck that there weren't more fatalities last night, not just by the fact that there were other motorists here, but also just how close to residential buildings we are.
James Oaten reporting there from Melbourne. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander viewers are advised this next story contains the name of a person who has died and a warning the report contains distressing details. An Adelaide father has been sentenced to 19 months in prison for criminal neglect, which led to his son's death. Reporter Evelyn Leckie has more.
Shane Mackenzie Wanganeen wept in the dock as the Supreme Court judge recounted the final hours of his 7-year-old son's life. Wanganeen was previously facing a charge of manslaughter, but that charge was dropped after he entered a guilty plea to criminal neglect last year. The court previously heard a GP diagnose Mackay with constipation in February 2022, but Wanganeen failed to seek medical attention when his son's condition worsened. The Ghana-Narungga boy died of pneumonia and sepsis 3 days later. A post-mortem examination found the boy's lungs were almost double the size of what a healthy 7-year-old should be. The Supreme Court judge criticised Wanganeen for completing several other tasks like fixing his aunt's car and arranging a cash advance before taking his son to hospital. The court heard Mackay was gasping for breath and near death when he arrived at hospital. The judge acknowledged the cumulative adversity Wanganeen had faced growing up as an Aboriginal man, growing up without his biological parents. Wanganeen was given a non-parole period of 10 months. He's already served 8 months in prison, meaning he could be eligible for parole in just under 2 months.
Residents are beginning to return to their homes and reopen their businesses after Bundaberg's worst flood in more than a decade in the south of Queensland. Meantime, a search is underway for a man missing in floodwater at nearby Burnett Heads. Reporter James Taylor is in Bundaberg.
Police have said a man went missing at around 1 a.m. This morning in Bundaberg. They said he went off a houseboat into the Burnett River, where the boat was located near Burnett Heads, which is the mouth of the river here in Bundaberg. The man hasn't been seen since, and a search is underway, and police are asking anyone with any further information to contact them. So certainly, of course, a concerning development and a sign that this disaster is by no means over. Floodwaters had gone into people's homes and businesses. Some people we spoke to said it was inches of water, others said it was more than a foot. People said that they'd been given sufficient notice about the fact that it was going to be a similar flood to one that hit this town in 2010. Those people who could remember the height of the floodwaters at that time moved their possessions and their stock up above that height, and thus were able to save those possessions. However, regardless, after the floodwater receded, it left behind inches of mud and sediment in people's homes and businesses. So locals we spoke to said they'd been out from first light yesterday, hosing down that mud and sweeping it out. Some people said it might be months before they can return to their homes, and others said it might be just a couple of days, but the clean-up effort is well and truly underway.
And a week into the top-end flooding crisis, there have been complaints from some residents in Katherine that disaster relief payments are proving hard to access. Reporter James Elton is there.
Well, this flood disaster is wearing on for the people of Katherine. It's been almost a week since floodwaters peaked at just over 19 metres on Saturday night, making it the worst flood for this top-end town in almost 30 years. While the river has been receding, the emergency is ongoing in many ways. Many rural roads around Katherine are still significantly flooded. To give you some idea of the operational tempo that is still going on here, we spoke with a helicopter pilot yesterday who was responsible for a particularly spectacular rescue that was captured on video, where 2 people and a dog were rescued from raging floodwaters with the helicopter hovering just centimetres above the car. That helicopter pilot was telling us that the airspace is hectic around Katherine at the moment. There are a large number of helicopter companies here, and they do work in things like helicopter mustering, but also in the tourism industry. All of those helicopter pilots are out, delivering food to isolated households, isolated Aboriginal communities not far from here. For others, this is now turning into a recovery stage. There's been problems on that front. The government announced some time ago now that there would be disaster relief payments for people in Katherine. Those are available, but they're available in the form of a physical card that people have to go and pick up. And the wait times at some of those sites where the card is available have been extreme. People waiting for hours, eventually being turned away and having to come back a second day. There will be other forms of support payment as well, but there's a real growing sense of frustration that some of these supports have been so difficult to access. The other big question that a lot of people in Katherine have is they remember significant Australian Defence Force presence on the ground, both in the 1998 floods and the 2006 floods. Now, it's not to say that Defence hasn't been doing anything. Many Defence members have been volunteering in civilian clothing, and Defence was involved in sandbagging efforts right at the beginning of this flood. But most people I've spoken to around Katherine haven't seen the ADF, and that's in spite of the fact that we're right next to a huge RAF base, one of the most strategically important Air Force bases in the north of Australia. We asked the Federal Emergency Minister what's going on there, and she told us that the Northern Territory Government has not requested personnel to assist in this flood recovery from that Tyndall RAF base. So we'll be continuing to follow that up with the Northern Territory Government as this disaster approaches the 1-week mark.
8 days out from the South Australian election, Premier Peter Malinauskas and Opposition Leader Ashton Hearn have faced off at a leaders' debate. Here's reporter Catherine Birmingham in Adelaide.
The Premier here in South Australia, Peter Malinauskas, and the Opposition Leader Ashton Hearn have just faced off at a leaders' debate at Adelaide Oval just behind me. And this debate really touched on a lot of the key topics that we've seen come up throughout this campaign. We're 3 weeks into a 4-week campaign here in South Australia, and they were issues like housing, health, the cost of living, and also managing the state's finances and the state budget. Both of the leaders really looked to attack each other over their perceived weaknesses. For Ashton Hearn, the Opposition Leader, that meant going after the Premier over his failure to deliver on Labor's major 2022 election commitment to fix the ambulance ramping crisis here in South Australia. She really pushed him to apologise for that, which he did on stage before the crowd here. And for the Premier, he looked to push his opponent, Ashton Hearn, on some of the difficulties that her party's had over the last 4 years. She's the third leader that they've had over the last 4 years. And he also challenged her to explain how the Liberals would pay for all of the election commitments that they've made so far. He says that that bill has come in at over $5 billion, but the Opposition Leader disagreed, said that it wasn't that high, that figure was fanciful. However, she wouldn't be revealing exactly what the figure is or how the Liberals will pay until just before the election day, March 21st, next week. This debate was adjudicated by a group of judges from the SA Press Club Committee, and they did have a quick meeting just after the debate to decide a winner. Their comments were that both candidates, or both leaders, put forward polished performances and had excellent cut-through of Ashton Hearn, who I mentioned has been leader of the Liberals here for less than 100 days. They said the Liberals are in capable hands, and of the Premier, they said he delivered equally as impressive a performance. But ultimately, they gave the win very narrowly to Peter Malinowskis, who they gave 38.25 points out of a possible 50. They gave Ashton Hearn slightly a lower score, 36 points out of 50. So early voting here in South Australia does start tomorrow. This was the last opportunity that both leaders had to put their pitch to voters in South Australia before they start heading to the polls on Saturday.
A busy highway linking Sydney to Western New South Wales will remain closed for at least 3 months following the discovery of cracks in an historic bridge. The Great Western Highway between Lithgow and Mount Victoria was closed on Monday after cracking was detected at Convict Bridge on the Victoria Pass. The state government has called the situation incredibly serious and says additional public transport will be rolled out to help communities manage the disruption. Byron Bay's Blues Fest has been cancelled less than 3 weeks before it was due to begin. The multi-day music festival was set to feature Split Enz and local hardcore heroes Parkway Drive as the headline acts. Liquidators have already been called in and ticket holders have been told they are unlikely to get a refund. More than 100,000 people passed through the gates last year, but some left angry at festival founder Peter Noble after he backflipped on his announcement that 2025 would be the festival's final year. Time now for finance. Here's Alicia Barry.
The threat to the global economy from the intensifying Middle East war hit home for investors this week. Attacks on oil tankers in the Gulf and warnings from Iran shattered hopes of a quick resolution to the conflict and has sent oil prices to around $100 a barrel, stoking inflation fears and raising the chances of a rate hike next Tuesday. Despite strength in financial and energy sectors, the Australian share market couldn't hang on to early gains, and the ASX 200 and All Ords lost just over 0.1% each. Let's go to the oil price now, where Brent crude is holding above $100 a barrel. The US has relaxed its embargo of Russian oil temporarily, and gold is back on the rise. Fuel refiners Viva Energy and Ampol gained as the Australian government attempts to shore up confidence by taking measures to increase fuel supplies domestically. Drone Shield was the standout in the top 200 list, while gold miner Northern Star had its worst session in 6 years after the company gave a bad trading update, saying it expects to produce 20% less gold than previously forecast. Karoon Energy and Genesis Minerals were also on the way down. Turning overseas, where investors remain worried about just how long the Middle East war could go on, with Wall Street's main indices, the Dow and the S&P trading sharply lower. Markets in the UK, Japan and South Korea also having a pretty bad session. Well, NABTrade Director Gemma Dale says investors do need to be fully alive to the financial ramifications if the Iran conflict doesn't calm down soon.
At this point in time, certainly some pundits are suggesting, and sort of long-term economists and those who have had meaningful views about the Middle East and the risks there, are that even if Trump can secure an exit, that doesn't mean things settle down, that the risk is now there, that insurers are now going to be constantly concerned about risks in the Strait, that oil prices are higher for longer, whether we like it or not. And they may not stay above $100 a barrel, but they are already up 50% this month. They're up 66% this year. Like, it's dramatically higher already. That then feeds into a whole lot of additional risks in the economy. Is it going to be a 70s-style stagflation scenario? That's a worst-case scenario for markets, but I think a lot of people are feeling that there are risks that are perhaps not priced in just yet.
Naptrade's Gemma Dale says even as the conflict dominates investor attention, the focus will turn to the RBA's rates decision next week. And despite broad expectations of a rate hike next Tuesday, the Australian dollar has come back from this week's peak of around 72 US cents. It's now down to 70.6 US cents. And that's finance for now.
Thanks, Alicia. For decades, we've been told wholemeal is the healthier alternative to white bread, but a new high-fibre wheat variety more than 20 years in the making could turn that advice on its head. Landline's Tim Lee has the story.
Plumes of dust rise over the grains belt of southern Australia. These harvesters, cutting swathes through these golden fields of wheat, are part of an international success story, more than 2 decades in the making, and gaining momentum. They're harvesting a variety called high amylose wheat.
High amylose wheat is a novel form of wheat that we've developed using conventional breeding strategies, where we've changed the composition of the starch in the grain so that we've increased the fibre content in the flour that's produced by about 6-fold.
This wheat variety is being hailed as a major milestone for the grains industry. It's also a triumph for science, the food industry and the wider health sector, because it offers a remedy for one of the greatest dietary challenges confronting the Western world.
We have what's called the fibre gap, where people are not getting enough fibre in their diets.
Public health awareness campaigns over decades have largely failed to affect big changes in dietary behaviour.
So the idea behind high amylose wheat is, if we can't change the diet, can we actually change the composition of what people normally eat so they get the benefits of high fibre in the foods that they eat every day and love?
Crucially, the flour that will be milled from this grain doesn't resemble coarse wholemeal flour. It looks and functions so much like conventional flour from conventional wheat that its presence in baked goods is undetectable. This wheat has 10 times the amount of resistant starch as ordinary wheat. And when you consider that a third of the world's population eats a wheat diet of bread, pizza, pasta and tortillas, it means it has enormous implications for human health. It now means that millions and millions of people can eat their normal diet and still get enough of the right fibre.
Yeah, really interesting Landline story there, and you can see more of that on the complete show of Landline this Sunday at 12:30 on ABC TV and any time later on ABC iView. Take a look at the satellite image. Masses of cloud across the northern tropics in a monsoon is generating heavy rain and storms. On the synoptic chart, that monsoon should drive showers and storms over the tropics. Moist onshore flow could cause showers for parts of Queensland and New South Wales. So looking around the country for tomorrow, in Queensland, showers about the east from the Sunshine Coast all the way up to Mackay, as well as in the North Tropical Coast and the Gulf Country. To New South Wales and the ACT, isolated showers in the northeast and the interior with possible late storms across the central west. In Victoria, a dry and partly cloudy day in the south and the west, mainly sunny elsewhere. A fine start to the weekend for Tassie, apart from some isolated light showers about the west coast. Turning to South Australia, dry throughout, apart from the chance of showers and storms in the state's far west. For WA, showers for parts of the southwest, while heavy rainfall is possible for parts of the Kimberley and the Goldfields region. And in the Northern Territory, the chance of heavy rain and storms for Central Australia, as well as showers with storms for the top end. And looking ahead to Sunday's forecast for the capital cities, Brisbane partly cloudy, Sydney sunny, Canberra sunny, Melbourne sunny, Hobart partly cloudy, Adelaide mostly sunny, Perth sunny and Darwin showers with a possible storm. This is ABC News. The top stories. The government is releasing 762 million litres of petrol and diesel from Australia's domestic reserves in an effort to bolster supply. Energy Minister Chris Bowen insists Australia's fuel supply has not been affected by the war in the Middle East, but panic buying has caused shortages. The plan will see fuel prioritised for regional and agricultural customers facing shortages. Iran's new Supreme Leader has made his first official statement saying he's determined to keep the Strait of Hormuz closed to fuel tankers. And a US Air Force refuelling aircraft involved in Operation Epic Fury has crashed in western Iraq. The Islamic resistance in Iraq has claimed responsibility, but the US Central Command claims the crash is not a result of hostile or friendly fire. Two teenagers riding an e-bike have died in a collision with a motorcycle in the south of Brisbane. The 16-year-old and 15-year-old died at the scene, while the 52-year-old motorbike rider was taken to hospital in a serious condition. Police investigating the deaths say the e-bike did not have headlights on at the time of the collision. And this year's Blues Fest Music Festival has been cancelled, leaving fans and the local community disappointed. Just 3 weeks out from the Byron Bay event, organisers cited rising costs and insurance for it no longer going ahead. Ticket holders have been told that they're not likely to get a refund. The liquidator, Worrells, says people will be notified if this changes. The Middle East conflict is also having a significant impact in some of the world's most remote villages. Gulf countries depend heavily on migrant labour, and the majority of civilians killed there have been South Asian workers. South Asia correspondent Meghna Bali travelled to a remote village in Nepal to meet the family of one of the victims.
The grief inside this home is overwhelming. "They killed my precious son," she screams repeatedly. Her husband tries to comfort her.
It has been really painful to lose my only son.
29-year-old Dibas Shrestha was killed on March 1st after an Iranian missile attack near Abu Dhabi's Zayed International Airport. The missile was intercepted, but debris struck and killed him.
I saw news that 3 people, a Nepali, a Pakistani and a Bangladeshi, had been killed in the attack. The media showed a photo of the Nepali victim. It wasn't my son, but then we received his body.
Like many in this remote Himalayan village, Dibas left home for work in the Gulf. He worked night shifts as a security guard, one of millions of South Asian migrants that keep the region running. The work can be difficult, but the wages are higher than what they could earn here.
He used to tell us, "Don't panic about household expenses. I will do better."
Dibas is one of at least 13 civilians killed in Iranian strikes across the Gulf since the conflict began. Most of the victims are migrant workers. Millions more remain in the region, many with no way out, like these Indian seafarers.
Our company is not listening to us. Continuous bombing is taking place.
Their worst fears, now a tragic reality for some. Dibas's body was repatriated and cremated last week, but the rituals offer little comfort.
He had big dreams, to work for a few years, then come back and start a business in Nepal.
Dibas Shrestha left this quiet village hoping to build a better life for his family. Instead, thousands of kilometres away, he became an unexpected victim of war, and the future his family was counting on is now gone. The consequences of a distant war felt unbearably close to home. Meghna Bali, ABC News, Gorkha.
And a British man has been charged and detained in Dubai for filming Iranian missiles over the city. He's one of many people arrested under strict cyber crime laws that prohibit publishing or sharing material which could disturb public security. A group called Detained in Dubai is providing legal assistance to the British man. Its CEO is Roger Sterling, and she joins us now from Cairns in North Queensland. Roger Sterling, welcome. So what do you know about who's been charged and what with?
Well, we have one British citizen along with 20 other people who have all been charged together. And they've been charged under very vague UAE cybercrime laws that prohibit, well, quite a lot, and almost anyone in the region at the moment is probably criminal under these laws. So he's been charged with having recorded a missile overhead that was intercepted, and it's not clear whether he is being charged with sharing it or publishing it. It's really vague, and because there's 20 other people in the indictment, we really don't know which charge applies to which person. And since then, we've received even more clients who have approached us looking for assistance who have also been detained under the country's laws. It seems that anyone who has taken a photo, even before the warnings came out from authorities that said you cannot take photos, anyone who took a photo before, even if they didn't share it, is potentially subject to 2 years imprisonment.
How are the authorities aware of it if people haven't shared it?
In these cases, people have been wandering the streets, nearby hotels, the beach, and police have been approaching them and asking to look at their phones. And if they see in the camera roll that there's a photograph of a missile, and it doesn't necessarily have to be them who took it, they have it on their phone. So that means a family member or a friend could have sent it to them. They'll be taken to the police station.
And have you spoken to the British person who sought your help? And do you know anything about the circumstances in which they were apprehended?
It's difficult to ascertain at this point. I'm in touch with the family, and he's had very limited access to the telephone, like most of them. In some instances, people are being treated almost like national security threats, and that's another risk that a citizen could be taken away and interrogated without access to their embassy, without access to a lawyer. So at this time, we're just seeking further information. But also the UAE's ambassador to the UK is aware of the case, and perhaps the negative effect that these wild arrests, and they are broad and they are arresting a lot of people, dozens at least, if not hundreds, are actually having a negative impact on the country, because these are the people who have stayed in the UAE voluntarily, and a lot of them are patriotic. A lot of them have been supporting the country and impressed by the way they've intercepted the missiles. So it seemed counterproductive to then turn the law on them, especially, I mean, we're talking about Filipino maids or just, your average person, a father, a mother walking along the street, and suddenly they're turning them into criminals, locking them up. But influencers who have posted exactly the same content haven't been charged. They've simply been asked to delete the picture.
Why are influencers getting special treatment?
Well, certainly always in the UAE, we've had celebrities and influencers who sort of, the law doesn't apply to them. It's arbitrary, and they're there to promote the country, and the UAE doesn't want influencers to turn against them. So they're not given the same treatment. It's a two-tier system, but your average Australian travelling to Dubai is at great risk.
So how long, you mentioned some of these people are actually in custody, and we might just take down those images for the moment. Some of these people have been in custody. Do you know for how long? And are they actually kind of in jails?
I mean, we've had French citizens who were detained for 48 hours. They're interrogated to find out whether they were spying on behalf of Iran simply for taking these photos. They were released. This latest group of people, the 21 that I'm speaking of, it looks like they're actually going to be prosecuted, and I think the UAE is looking to prosecute people to set an example. So it'll be up to now, I think, diplomats and foreign governments to put that sort of pressure on the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs and perhaps encourage them to be a little less severe with the application of the law. So far, the 21 have been in prison for around about 4 days collectively, but this could go on for a very long period of time.
And what kind of penalties or sentences are they facing?
Well, at least 2 years in prison and fines of up to around $70,000. But it depends, because they can charge them with multiple counts under the UAE cybercrime laws, and then they could end up with very lengthy sentences. It's also worth warning that under these circumstances in a crisis situation, that people who take a photo could be charged under the cybercrime laws, but equally they could be treated as a national security threat. They could be taken away to CID headquarters and treated as a spy or treated as a security threat, and then they would be denied their rights and could be in prison indefinitely. These are things that people really do need to understand when they're travelling to the UAE.
Yeah, and you've worked in this area for quite some time. What do people? There wouldn't be many people travelling to the UAE right now, but what do people have to be aware of when they go there?
The cybercrime laws are probably one of the biggest threats to tourists and to expats, in that it criminalises everything that is imaginable, and it goes so far as to say a private email or a private SMS message between a husband and wife or a flatmate, friends, colleagues is subject to these cybercrime laws. So anything that you say privately can still be charged. And sharing news items, for example, from the Associated Press or a reputable news outlet, just simply sharing or commenting in public on social media is potentially a crime if the UAE doesn't support or like what's being said by another outlet. So the UAE has been very strict about negative commentary, anything, including talking about weather in the past, flooding, anything that could discourage tourism or affect the economy. And I think that most citizens would never imagine that that could possibly be illegal. Most travellers would never imagine that these laws can actually apply to things that they've done outside of the UAE. We've actually just had someone charged or arrested under these cybercrime laws because they took footage of a missile from outside of the UAE and then travelled to the UAE. So they were arrested. And the same goes for negative content. If someone says something negative about the UAE or shares a negative post about the UAE and then later travels there, perhaps even 4 years later, they can still be charged under these laws. Wow. And we've seen it. We've seen a woman charged under the cybercrime laws for a Facebook post that she'd made years before ever travelling to Dubai. So that was a shock.
Good information there. OK, Roger Sterling, thanks so much for talking to us from Cairns.
Thank you.
Now to breaking news, and dozens of people have been injured after missiles hit a village in northern Israel, according to Israel's emergency services. So this is the scene in Zazir near Nazareth, with paramedics reportedly treating at least 50 patients. Authorities say most of the injured are suffering from wounds from glass shards, with one woman moderately injured by shrapnel. The Israeli military says members of the Home Front Command have been sent to the scene. The FBI has deemed the ramming of a synagogue in the US state of Michigan as a targeted act of violence against the Jewish community. US authorities are also dealing with a shooting at a university in Virginia by a gunman linked to Islamic State.
The attack on the Temple Israel Synagogue in northern Detroit in the West Bloomfield Township unfolded just after midday local time. A man drove a vehicle into the synagogue doors, and we're told that he began to make his way in that vehicle down a hallway. Armed security guards engaged him. He is now dead, and the lead security guard was hit by the car and he was taken to hospital. Authorities say something ignited in the suspect's car. There was a significant fire. Aerial footage showed smoke billowing out of the building, and we're told that 30 law enforcement officers were treated for smoke inhalation. The FBI is now leading this investigation. The agency says 100 agents are involved, and they include bomb technicians and the weapons of mass destruction team.
This is a deeply disturbing and tragic incident, and our deepest sympathies are with the victims, their family, and the entire Jewish community. The FBI is here working with our state, local, and federal partners to investigate this incident, and I can confirm that we are leading the investigation right now as a targeted act of violence against the Jewish community.
Now, the community has been on high alert because of a rise in anti-Semitic acts, and also particularly since the start of hostilities in Iran. Security has been stepped up at places of worship in Michigan and in several other US states. Now, this incident is separate to a shooting that took place in the state of Virginia. A gunman targeted a Reserve Army officer training corps class that was at the University of Dominion. One person was killed, the gunman was also killed, and at least 2 people were injured. And what authorities now say is that that incident in Virginia is being investigated as an act of terrorism. And they've identified the gunman as a man who served a lengthy jail sentence after being convicted of attempting to provide material support to the Islamic State group.
In South Australia's north, floodwaters have receded after torrential rain almost a fortnight ago. Communities are turning their attention to stretches of damaged roads and infrastructure. Local authorities are worried the multi-million-dollar bill will blow their annual budgets.
Running a service station in the Flinders Ranges, Scott Teague meets countless drivers. Many have told him recent flooding has been the worst in living memory.
And we ended with about 120 mils, and the following days the roads got closed and you couldn't get out of Walker.
A lot of water. Heavy rain saw major flooding, swelling creeks, stranding drivers and swallowing roads. As the floodwaters subside, the scale of damage is being assessed.
It was a deluge. It was an absolute disaster in terms of our road infrastructure.
About 20 kilometres outside Corn, floodwaters have washed away an entire lane of road. It's one of the many damaged routes across the Flinders Ranges region.
It's around $7 to $10 million to fix the roads. Our budget is $7 million a year.
Authorities say events like this are exposing long-running gaps in federal funding.
South Australia have 11.8% of the country's roads. We have 7% of the population, and we've ended up with 5.5% of the funding.
The state and federal government has committed to provide disaster funding to help fix the roads. While it's welcome, advocates say this doesn't address a flawed formula that calculates national road funding.
We're really interested in how this is, how they're going to make it up.
With the biggest drop in almost 2 decades, local councils say it will take more than a business-as-usual approach to get the roads up to scratch. Janae Madden, ABC News, Hawker.
Australia's future scientists have swarmed on Sydney to compete in a fast-paced sports-style robotics tournament. Hundreds of children in 42 teams have designed, built and programmed industrial-sized robots to compete in the themed engineering games. Will de Lima is one of the organisers and Ashley Nesselrode is competing, and they both join us now from the tournament in front of a big audience, I understand, in Sydney. Ashley and Will, welcome to you both. So Ash, first off, tell us how much work you've put into this and show us your robot.
Yeah, so the game was first launched on the 11th of January, and since then my team 3132, has been working in the school holidays around 8 hours a day for 4 meetings during the week on our robot here. So we're basically split into all these different sub-teams, including like mechanical, software, design, outreach, strategy, all those different sub-teams that all collaborate together to build the robot I have here. So our team is made up of around 90 students. 50 of us join us here at the competition. And the way that our robot works is that, so this is a game piece, it's called a fuel. It is intaked with our compliant wheels here that are actuated by a piston through pneumatics, and then it is stored in our robot and later fed to our launcher by a spindexer that basically is a disc that spins the fuel around and redirects it to the launcher, where more compliant wheels feed it to the flywheels at the top that then launch it into the hub you can probably see behind me there. And another part of it is a climb that's at the end of the matches, where we have constant force springs that lift the climb, and it is later retracted by a motor-driven system. Additionally, we have a lot of software components on our robot here. So we use vision to autonomously recognize where on the field we are at all times during a match. And that is basically run off of orange pies on the robot, and it's all coded by software and all that, so that in the first period of our matches, which is purely autonomous, no human input, we are able to know where we are on the field and also score into the hub.
Wow, so you've got so many people, I can hear the echo in the background there through the stadium. So many people in your team. What was it like working as a team to put something so complicated together?
Yeah, so basically within all our sub-teams, we make sure we have, what's really important is a lot of communication between us. So what that kind of looks like is we make sure to have meetings with all the different sub-teams at both the start and end of every night that we have to make sure all the knowledge is like streamlined across the sub-teams and we know our priorities and like what we need to do next to have the robot actually made and created and ensuring that we all work together for our combined finished product that you see here now.
And what an impressive product it is. And Will, what's it like for you as an organiser to witness this all happening now?
It is pretty incredible. This event, while it runs for 3 days till Sunday, it's taken months and months of work, not only for my team, but for the volunteers. And as Ashley was saying, I think it's more of an ordeal for the teams, right? So while it might have been 3 months in planning, for some of these teams, they've been working 12 months to work up to this point. So really, really exciting.
And what's motivated you to become involved in organising things like this?
That's a good question. My passion is really working with young people. I've been doing that my entire career. But through that, I've really noticed STEM as being a great vehicle to empower young people. And that's what FIRST is all about. At the end of the day, Australia needs more engineers. We need more scientists. We need more innovators. We need more young people that are getting involved in STEM, right? And FIRST is a great vehicle to firstly not only inspire young people to get passionate about STEM, but to provide a practical application for the learning outcomes that they're getting in their school environments.
Cool. And so, Ash, how's your team gone today? And are you feeling pretty confident?
So our team has had a couple of practice matches today, and through that we've gone pretty well. We've been able to launch a lot of the fuel, the game piece, into the hub. We've been able to practice our autonomous routines and all our subsystems, our climb and everything. And we know that from the lead up to this competition, we've spent so many hours, so many meetings, all working together to create this robot. So because of that, we're feeling pretty confident now. We've had extra additional specialized meetings on the lead up to this competition, including me as a driver doing driver training and practicing those cycles, improving our times and all of that. So I think we're pretty confident going into this competition, and we're excited to see where it goes.
And with a name like Thunder Down Under, how could you be anything but confident? Thanks so much for having a chat to us. And Will, I believe we've now got front row seats to some action.
We do. We got 6 teams revved and ready to go. I'm going to count them down. I need everyone to join me. 3, 2, 1, go!
And our teams are off here. The Southern Cross Regional team, 4788.
Oh, it's pretty hectic.
Fuel cells in the middle. Hastings Heroes. Remember behind Rubber Rebels.
Ashley, I don't know if you can still hear us, but can you explain what's going on?
Leaders coming on in, grabbing more fuel from the centre stage. Heading over to the hub to load that fuel
we've lost
into
Ashley,
the hub.
but that gives you an idea of what it's like.
The end of the autonomous
okay,
period.
we might leave that there. But yeah, that looks like terrific fun there out in part of Sydney. If you want to go and have a look, you can look it up online. Time now for sport. Here's Jared Coote.
Matildas will take on North Korea tonight in the quarterfinals of the Women's Asian Cup in Perth. Star players Ali Razzo and Steph Cayley will miss the game due to concussion. The winner will not only progress to Tuesday's first semi-final in Perth, but will also automatically qualify for next year's Women's World Cup to be played in Brazil. Carlton has avoided another second-half collapse to hang on and beat Richmond by 4 points in round 1 of the AFL. Carlton led by 27 points. Brisbane Broncos' NRL Premiership defence is still yet to get off the ground after a second straight loss to start the 2026 season. After going down 26-0 in the season opener at Penrith, the Broncos have followed it up with another defeat in front of their home fans, beaten 40-32 by Parramatta after giving up a 20-6 lead. Coach Michael Maguire says his side is capable of turning things around.
Oh, look, I'm just disappointed. You know, I know, as we showed for 20 minutes, what type of team we're capable of doing, but at the end of the day, as we all say, it's an 80-minute game. You know, unless we want to dig in deep to get to that, then, you know, we'll go through potentially a bit of pain. But, you know, I know this group are working in the background, and if they stick to it, they'll find their way to what they are capable of doing.
Australian Tally Gibson's fairy tale run of the Indian Wells tennis tournament is over after losing in the quarterfinal. The 21-year-old has gone down to 14th seeded Czech Linda Noskova 6-2, 4-6, 6-2. Gibson gave up 9 break points in the 3-set loss. The Australian will now move into the top 100 in the world and is the first Aussie woman to reach the Indian Wells quarterfinal since Casey Dellacqua. That was back in 2014. Australia's women's basketballers have been forced to come from behind to defeat Japan 81-71 at the World Cup qualifying tournament in Turkey. Trailing by 9 points at half-time, the Opals limited Japan to just 4 points in that all-important final quarter, where they scored 23 points of their own. Skipper Sammy Whitcomb top scored with 17 points. Australia will take on Hungary in their final group game. That'll be later on tomorrow night. And that is all in sport for now.
Take a look at the satellite image. Masses of cloud across the northern tropics in a monsoon is generating heavy rain and storms. On the synoptic chart, that monsoon should drive showers and storms over the tropics. Moist onshore flow could cause showers for parts of Queensland and New South Wales. So looking around the country for tomorrow, in Queensland, showers about the east from the Sunshine Coast all the way up to Mackay, as well as in the North Tropical Coast and the Gulf Country. To New South Wales and the ACT, isolated showers in the northeast and the interior with possible late storms across the central west. In Victoria, a dry and partly cloudy day in the south and the west, mainly sunny elsewhere. A fine start to the weekend for Tassie, apart from some isolated light showers about the west coast. Turning to South Australia, dry throughout, apart from the chance of showers and storms in the state's far west. For WA, showers for parts of the southwest, while heavy rainfall is possible for parts of the Kimberley and the Goldfields region. And in the Northern Territory, the chance of heavy rain and storms for Central Australia, as well as showers with storms for the top end. And looking ahead to Sunday's forecast for the capital cities, Brisbane partly cloudy, Sydney sunny, Canberra sunny, Melbourne sunny, Hobart partly cloudy, Adelaide mostly sunny, Perth sunny, and Darwin showers with a possible storm. Stick with us here on the ABC News channel. Going for a short break now. We'll be back soon. We'll leave you for the moment with some shots of this spot in northern Israel where some missiles have hit a village. The village is called Zazir. It's near Nazareth. There were dozens of people were injured. There's one woman who has been injured seriously. Just another example of the ongoing situation there with the war in the Middle East. With the bombing of Tehran continuing, and also this news that there's been a US refuelling plane that's crashed in Iraq with 6 people on board. Stick with us here on the ABC News channel.